1942, Cambridge, Massachusetts. A chemistry professor named Louis Fieser is standing in his kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, stirring something in a metal bowl with a wooden spoon. His wife is asleep upstairs. The house smells like gasoline. The bowl is warm to the touch. Fieser dips the spoon into the mixture and watches how it moves. Thick, sticky, the consistency of honey mixed with petroleum jelly. It clings to the spoon like it doesn't want to let go. He carries the bowl outside to his backyard. It's February, snow on the ground. His breath fogs in the cold air. He's built something in the yard, a small structure made of balsa wood and rice paper, a miniature house, Japanese construction style. Fieser pours the contents of the bowl onto the little house. The gel spreads slowly, coating the wood, seeping into the paper walls. He strikes a match. What happens next will change the course of a war. It will kill more people in a single night than both atomic bombs combined. It will burn for decades in jungles halfway around the world, and it will haunt Louis Fieser until the day he dies. But right now, standing in his backyard in Cambridge, watching his little wooden house explode into flames that nothing can extinguish, Louis Fieser has only one thought: it works. The Pentagon had given him $50 and an impossible request: create something that burns and won't stop burning. Something that sticks to everything it touches. Something that water can't put out. Fieser had done it in his kitchen with ingredients that cost less than a restaurant dinner. He named his creation by combining the two chemicals that made it work: naphthenate and palmitate. He shortened it, Napalm. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. The atomic bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the weapons everyone remembers. They're in every history book, every documentary, every conversation about the end of World War II. But on the night of March 9, 1945, a weapon that cost $50 to develop killed more Japanese civilians in 6 hours than both atomic bombs would kill in their initial blasts combined, and almost no one talks about it. I want to know something. Have you ever heard of Operation Meetinghouse? Have you ever heard of the Tokyo firebombing? Drop a comment and tell me honestly, did you learn about this in school? Because I'm willing to bet most of you didn't, and there's a reason for that. A reason that says more about how we remember wars than it says about the wars themselves. Let me take you back, before the fire, before the 100,000 dead, before the rivers that boiled and the winds that pulled people into the flames. Let me take you back to the problem that created the solution that became a nightmare. 1942, the United States is losing the war in the Pacific. Pearl Harbor was only months ago. The Japanese have swept through the Philippines, through Malaya, through the Dutch East Indies. They seem unstoppable, and American military planners are desperately searching for ways to strike back. The idea of bombing Japan itself is tantalizing. The home islands, the factories, the shipyards, the cities where the weapons are made and the soldiers are trained. If America could burn Japan's industrial capacity to the ground, the war might end years earlier. But there's a problem that seems almost absurd when you first hear it. American bombs don't burn well enough. The standard incendiary bombs of 1942 use a mixture of gasoline and white phosphorus. They work fine against European targets: brick buildings, stone churches, concrete factories. The bombs hit, the gasoline ignites, the phosphorus keeps it burning, and structures catch fire. But Japanese cities aren't built like European cities. Japanese construction is wood and paper. Traditional houses have wooden frames, paper screens, tatami mat floors. The walls are thin. The roofs are tile or thatch. Entire neighborhoods are built so close together that you can reach out a window and touch the house next door. These cities should burn like kindling. They should be the easiest targets in the world, but they're not, because liquid gasoline doesn't stick. It splashes, spreads thin, and evaporates. It burns hot, but fast. Japanese firefighters discovered they could extinguish American incendiary bombs with sand and water before the fires spread. The wooden buildings would scorch but not catch. The paper walls would singe but not ignite completely. The Japanese civil defense system was working, and American bombers were flying 1,000-mile missions to drop bombs that weren't doing their job. The War Department put out a call to American universities. We need something better, something that burns longer, something that sticks to surfaces, something that can't be put out. The budget was almost nothing. The military was spending billions on ships and planes and tanks. They had pennies left over for chemistry experiments. Enter Louis Fieser. Fieser was 43 years old in 1942, a professor of organic chemistry at Harvard. Brilliant, eccentric, obsessed with molecular structures that weren't supposed to exist. He had already made a name for himself by synthesizing vitamin K, work that would eventually contribute to a Nobel Prize for someone else. The War Department's request landed on his desk because someone remembered a paper he had written about flammable compounds. Could Dr. Fieser help develop an improved incendiary agent? Fieser said yes. He was given a small budget, a few graduate students, and a problem that seemed impossible. Make gasoline stick. Gasoline is a liquid. Liquids don't stick. That's basic physics. You can thicken gasoline with rubber, but rubber is expensive and the War Department needed cheap. You can mix it with oil, but oil doesn't burn hot enough. Every obvious solution had an obvious problem. Fieser approached it differently. He didn't try to make gasoline thicker. He tried to make it into a gel. The chemistry is elegant in its simplicity. Certain aluminum salts, when mixed with gasoline, create a reaction that transforms the liquid into a sticky, jelly-like substance. The gasoline molecules become trapped in a matrix of aluminum soap. The result is a gel that pours like honey, sticks like glue, and burns like hell. Fieser experimented with different aluminum compounds. Naphthenate worked. Palmitate worked better. A combination of both worked best of all. Napalm. The first batch was made in Fieser's kitchen because the Harvard chemistry labs were being used for other war projects. He mixed the ingredients in a bowl, tested the consistency, and carried it outside to see if it would burn. It burned. God, did it burn. Fieser built his miniature Japanese house in the backyard and set it on fire with his new gel. The structure was consumed in under a minute. The flames were so intense that snow melted in a circle around the fire. The gel stuck to the wood and kept burning even when Fieser threw water on it. The water flash evaporated before it could extinguish anything. He wrote up his results and sent them to the War Department. The response was immediate. How fast can you scale this up? By 1943, American factories were producing napalm by the ton. The gel was cheap, 60 cents a gallon. The ingredients were common. The process was simple enough that workers with no chemistry background could mix it safely, and it was loaded into a new weapon, the M69 incendiary bomb. The M69 was small, 6 pounds, a metal cylinder about 20 inches long and 3 inches wide. It didn't look like much. It didn't look like something that could kill 100,000 people. The bombs were packed into clusters, 38 M69s in a single container, called an E-46 cluster bomb. The container would open at altitude, scattering the individual bombs across a wide area. Each M69 had a time delay fuse and a small explosive charge. When it hit a roof, it would punch through, ignite, and spray burning napalm across an area about the size of a living room. One B-29 bomber could carry 40 E-46 clusters. That's over 1,500 individual napalm bombs per aircraft. And on the night of March 9, 1945, 334 B-29s took off from the Mariana Islands, heading for Tokyo. General Curtis LeMay was in command. LeMay was a hard man, cold, calculating. He had risen through the ranks by getting results when other commanders failed. He had restructured the bombing campaign against Germany. He had pioneered tactics that increased accuracy and reduced losses. And he had concluded that the high-altitude precision bombing of Japanese industry wasn't working. The targets were too scattered. The weather was too unpredictable. The jet stream at 30,000 feet pushed bombs miles off target. After months of missions, Japanese war production was barely dented. LeMay decided to try something different, something that went against every principle of the American air campaign up to that point. He would bomb low, at night. And he would target not factories but neighborhoods. The logic was brutal but straightforward. Japanese industry wasn't concentrated in large factories like German industry. It was distributed across residential areas, in small workshops and family businesses. The workers who built airplane parts and assembled weapons lived in the same wooden houses where they worked. Burn the houses, and you burn the workers. Burn the workers, and you burn the war machine. LeMay stripped his B-29s of most defensive weapons. Guns weighed thousands of pounds. Without them, each bomber could carry more napalm. He bet that Japanese night fighters and anti-aircraft guns wouldn't be effective against low-altitude attacks in darkness. He was right. At 9 o'clock on the night of March 9th, the first B-29s appeared over Tokyo at 1,500 meters, lower than anyone had ever dared to fly over an enemy capital. The Pathfinder aircraft went in first. Their job was to mark the target area with napalm, creating a burning X that subsequent waves would use as an aiming point. They flew over Shitamachi, the working-class district of eastern Tokyo. Dense neighborhoods, narrow streets, houses built so close together that fire leaping from roof to roof would have nowhere to stop. The Pathfinders dropped their loads. The X began to burn. Then the main force arrived, 325 B-29s, each carrying 7 tons of napalm bombs. They came in waves 20 minutes apart, giving the fires time to spread before adding more fuel. The M69s tumbled from bomb bays, their clusters opening in the cold air, scattering across the city like deadly seeds. They punched through tile roofs, through paper walls, through wooden floors. They ignited, and the gel did exactly what Louis Fieser had designed it to do. It stuck, it burned, and it would not stop. Within 30 minutes, the individual fires began to merge. Entire blocks were burning. The flames were so intense that they created their own weather system. This is a phenomenon called a firestorm. When enough fire burns in a concentrated area, the heat creates a massive updraft. Air rushes in from all sides to replace the rising hot air. This incoming air feeds the flames, making them burn hotter, which creates stronger updrafts, which pulls in more air. The winds that night reached 70 miles per hour in some areas. People running from the flames were knocked off their feet by the wind. Some were picked up and thrown into the fires they were trying to escape. The suction was so strong that it pulled people out of buildings and into the inferno. The temperature in the burning areas exceeded 1,000 degrees. Metal melted, glass liquefied. Human bodies were reduced to ash in seconds. But the worst deaths weren't from fire. They were from suffocation. A firestorm consumes oxygen faster than it can be replaced. People outside the burning zones collapsed and died because there was simply no air left to breathe. The flames had eaten it all. And then there were the rivers. Tokyo's Sumida River runs through the eastern part of the city. Thousands of people fled to the riverbanks, thinking the water would protect them. They waded in, dove under, held their children above the surface, but the water was surrounded by fire. The radiant heat was so intense that the river began to warm. People who stayed in too long found themselves in water that was approaching boiling temperature, and the fire was consuming the oxygen above the river too. People who kept their heads above water suffocated. People who ducked under came up to find there was nothing to breathe. Bodies floated in the Sumida River for days afterward, so many that they formed dams, so many that the water itself seemed to have turned solid with the dead. By dawn on March 10th, the fires were still burning. Smoke rose so high that B-29 crews on later missions could see the glow from 150 miles away. The smell of burning flesh drifted across Tokyo Bay and reached American ships offshore. When the flames finally died, 16 square miles of Tokyo had been erased from existence, an area larger than Manhattan below Central Park. Gone, ash and rubble, and the shapes of things that used to be buildings. The official death toll was 83,000, but that number is a fiction. The true count was never possible because so many victims were burned beyond recognition. Entire families vanished without a trace. Modern estimates suggest the real number is over 100,000 dead, perhaps significantly more. In 6 hours, 100,000 people, with a weapon that cost $50 to develop. Let me put that in perspective. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, killed approximately 70,000 people in the initial blast. The bomb dropped on Nagasaki 3 days later, killed approximately 40,000. Combined, 110,000. Operation Meetinghouse one night in Tokyo, over 100,000, possibly more. The firebombing of Tokyo killed more people in a single night than either atomic bomb. More than both of them if you only count immediate deaths and not radiation casualties. And Tokyo was just the beginning. Over the following months, LeMay's bombers visited 67 Japanese cities. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. City after city was fed to the napalm fires. By the time the atomic bombs fell in August, over 300,000 Japanese civilians had died in firebombing raids. Some estimates put the total at 500,000. The atomic bombs ended the war with a flash and a mushroom cloud. They became the symbols of apocalypse, the images that defined a new age of warfare. But the fire came first, and the fire killed more. So why don't we talk about it? Why is Hiroshima in every textbook, while Operation Meetinghouse is a footnote? Why do we remember the mushroom cloud, but not the firestorm? There are several answers, and none of them are comfortable. The first is novelty. The atomic bomb was something new, something that had never existed before. It represented the cutting edge of physics, the transformation of matter into energy, the power of the atom unleashed. It was scientifically fascinating in a way that napalm wasn't. Napalm was just chemistry, basic chemistry, the kind of thing a professor could cook up in his kitchen. There was nothing revolutionary about it, nothing that captured the imagination. The second answer is cleaner. The atomic bomb kills quickly. Flash, heat, pressure wave. Gone. The victims of Hiroshima died in seconds or minutes. The deaths were horrific, but they were fast. Napalm kills slowly. It sticks to skin and keeps burning. Victims of napalm burns survive for hours, days, sometimes weeks. They die of infection, of shock, of organ failure. Their deaths are drawn out and agonizing. The photographs from the Tokyo firebombing are hard to look at in a way that Hiroshima photographs aren't. The mushroom cloud is almost abstract, almost beautiful. The images of napalm victims are not beautiful at all. And the third answer is the hardest one. America wanted to remember the war a certain way. The atomic bomb could be framed as a mercy. A terrible weapon, yes, but one that ended the war quickly, that prevented an invasion of Japan that would have killed millions. The bomb was science triumphing over barbarity. The bomb was a necessary evil. How do you frame burning 100,000 civilians alive as a mercy? You don't. So you don't talk about it. Curtis LeMay understood this better than anyone. Years after the war, in a moment of unusual candor, he told a reporter something that rarely gets quoted in official histories. "If we had lost the war," LeMay said, "I would have been tried as a war criminal." He wasn't wrong. The firebombing of civilian areas was the same tactic that Germany had used against London, the same tactic that Japan had used against Chinese cities. When the enemy did it, we called it terrorism. When we did it, we called it strategic bombing. LeMay knew the moral weight of what he had ordered. He accepted it. He believed it was necessary to end the war, but he never pretended it was clean. Louis Fieser had a harder time. After the war, Fieser returned to Harvard. He continued teaching organic chemistry. He continued his research. He published papers. He trained graduate students. He never talked about napalm. His students had no idea that the quiet professor explaining molecular bonds had invented a weapon that had killed hundreds of thousands of people. It wasn't in his biography. It wasn't mentioned in department introductions. It was a ghost that Fieser carried silently. His family knew. His wife knew. Years later, his grandson would tell interviewers that Fieser had nightmares, that he would wake up in the night and sit in the dark, not speaking, that he had never forgiven himself for what his invention had done. Fieser had created napalm to help win the war, to save American lives, to bring the boys home faster. That was the logic. That was the justification. But logic doesn't stop nightmares. Justification doesn't erase the images of burning children. In 1967, during the height of the Vietnam War, Harvard students discovered that napalm was still being produced and used. That the gel invented in their university's backyard was now being dropped on villages in Southeast Asia. They protested. They demanded that Harvard sever ties with napalm research. They confronted Fieser directly. Fieser, by then in his late 60s, refused to discuss it. He said he had invented napalm in good faith for a legitimate military purpose. What happened afterward was not his responsibility. The students didn't accept that answer. They hounded him until his retirement. Louis Fieser died in 1977. His obituaries mentioned his work on vitamin K. They mentioned his contributions to organic chemistry. They mentioned napalm in a sentence or two, buried in the middle paragraphs. He got his wish. He was forgotten, but napalm wasn't. The gel that Fieser created in 1942 is still in military arsenals today. An improved version called Napalm B was developed for Vietnam. It burns hotter. It sticks better. It's even harder to extinguish. The United States continued using napalm through Korea, through Vietnam, through smaller conflicts that didn't make the news. The most famous image of the Vietnam War, the photograph of a naked girl running down a road with napalm burns on her back, was taken in 1972, 30 years after Fieser's backyard experiment. That girl's name is Phan Thi Kim Phuc. She survived. She lives in Canada now. She has spent her adult life advocating for peace and helping other burn victims. The scars on her back never healed. In 1980, the United Nations adopted a convention restricting the use of incendiary weapons against civilian populations. The United States did not sign until 2009, and even then, it reserved the right to use incendiary weapons if it determined the military necessity was sufficient. The recipe for napalm is not classified. It was declassified decades ago. Anyone with a high school chemistry education and access to basic supplies can make it. During various protests and riots over the years, people have done exactly that. Louis Fieser's $50 invention became one of the most widely copied weapons in history. Because it's cheap, because it's simple, because it works exactly as designed. Now, I promised you something at the end of this video, a secret that most people don't know, something that changes how you see everything I've just told you. Here it is. Operation Meetinghouse, the Tokyo firebombing, was not primarily intended to destroy industry or shorten the war. The internal documents tell a different story. By March of 1945, Japan had already lost. American military analysts knew it. The Japanese Navy was destroyed. The Japanese Air Force was grounded for lack of fuel. The home islands were blockaded. Starvation was beginning. Surrender was a matter of time. The firebombing campaign was designed to break the will of the Japanese people, to make them suffer so intensely that they would demand surrender regardless of what their military leaders wanted, to create so much pain that continued resistance became unthinkable. In other words, the 100,000 people who died on March 9th and 10th were not collateral damage. They were the target. Curtis LeMay said it explicitly in planning documents. The objective was not military infrastructure. The objective was civilian morale. The fires were meant to be seen, to be felt, to be remembered. They were meant to terrorize. We have a word for using violence against civilians to achieve political objectives. We call it terrorism. When other nations do it, we condemn it absolutely. We go to war over it. We spend trillions of dollars and thousands of lives fighting it. When we did it in 1945, we called it strategic necessity. I'm not telling you this to condemn America. I'm not telling you this to say the war shouldn't have been fought or that Japan was innocent. Japan's military committed atrocities across Asia that rival anything in human history. The rape of Nanking, the Bataan Death March, Unit 731. There is no moral high ground for Imperial Japan. But I'm telling you this because history isn't simple, because the people who dropped napalm on Tokyo weren't monsters. They were men who believed they were doing the right thing, men who went home to their families and lived normal lives and never stopped believing they had fought a just war. And I'm telling you this because a professor at Harvard invented a weapon in his kitchen for $50, and that weapon killed more people in one night than the most expensive military project in human history. Sometimes the most dangerous things aren't the most complex. Sometimes they're the simplest. A mixture of gasoline and aluminum soap, a wooden spoon, a metal bowl. That's all it takes to change the world. The next time you're on a flight that passes over Tokyo, look out the window. The city sprawls for miles, skyscrapers and highways, and 20 million people living their lives. None of those buildings existed in March of 1945. Every single one was built on ashes, and somewhere in the streets below, there are still people who remember the night the sky turned orange. Fewer every year, soon none at all. They're the last witnesses to what $50 and a Harvard kitchen can do. Louis Fieser never wanted to be remembered, and he got his wish. His name isn't in the history books. His face isn't on any memorials, but his invention is still burning. It burned in Korea, it burned in Vietnam, it burned in smaller wars that never made the news. And somewhere, right now, in some military warehouse, there are bombs filled with napalm, waiting. Because someone might decide the military necessity is sufficient. That's the secret. That's what they don't tell you in school. The fire never really went out. If this story hit you differently than you expected, drop a comment and tell me what you're thinking. I know this isn't an easy one. I know it raises questions that don't have clean answers. But that's why we tell these stories. Not because they're comfortable, because they're true. Hit subscribe if you want more. And share this with someone who thinks they know how World War II ended. Because the mushroom cloud is just the part we remember. The fire came first, and the fire killed more, and nobody talks about it.